Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. We've been spiraling in towards something that of course is quite central, which is that everybody has a choice. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, that every human being has been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an option. You can go up or you can go down. We've used the metaphor of flying or of gravity, of following the light or of remaining amongst the shadows. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us originally to be creatures of the light. في أحسن تقويم, in the best of forms. ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين, then we sent him down to the lowest of the low. Human beings are capable of rising above other orders of creation without exception, but they're also capable of descending to a degree lower than other orders of creation whose nature is simply to obey their own fitrah. Human beings uniquely are capable of disobeying the fitrah and sinking deep indeed. The Shaykh has been indicating the role of rahmah in this and the role of guidance. The principle that takes us away from these lower possibilities and takes us up to the remembrance of reality is a divine inspiration, a divine intervention. It's not something that we can manage on our own. Philosophers can theorize about higher realms, but actually reaching them is a different matter. Reaching them requires that we have wings and that we be borne aloft. Now, human beings have this tendency to follow their own grazing habits and never to look up, like sheep just munching through their lives, just looking at the next mouthful of grass and never once looking up at the sky. We have this possibility. But there is also the voice from heaven that calls us constantly and says, wake up, arise, don't sleep. And the human being is constantly between these two invitations, the invitation to the lower self and the invitation to fly. At every moment we have the option of doing one of those two things, and we can't do both simultaneously. We cannot be both up and down. That is the choice, one or the other. And the Shaykh was indicating that there is these degrees of the self within us. The lowest self is an-nafs al-ammara, the soul that's constantly commanding evil, and that is constantly with us. Strong or weak, it's always there. It always reminds us that there is something really ugly that we can do to gratify ourselves in any given situation. A breach of courtesy, a dive into a passion, some haram action. But there is also the possibility in every moment of rising up. So what is it, we ask ourselves, that gives us guidance as to how we make the right choice? We know that sometimes we make bad choices and that sometimes we make good choices, but how do we know what is a good choice? Given that our own ability to see the outcome of our actions and to judge the moral quality of what we might do is so limited. How often we do something that we think was right that turned out to be a disaster for ourselves or for others. How often we make bad decisions even in our dunya, we're likely to make bad decisions in our deen as well. So how do we sort ourselves out? How do we get away from these shadows and towards the light in a way that's reliable? Well, this is where the prophetic guidance steps in. The Holy Prophet has, as the Shaykh indicates, been likened to nur, to light. Without that light, we are simply groping in the darkness, sometimes making right decisions, sometimes taking wrong decisions. But when the light comes, and it is the light of the Sunnah of the Chosen One, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that is when قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ, right guidance, right action becomes clear from misguidance. Without that light, we are left to our own devices. Now it might be said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in us this fitrah and this natural desire for the good. That is true, but that in itself is not sufficient, because the mind is limited and its understanding of the self and of the needs of the self and of the needs of others is so limited that unless there is external detailed guidance, we are likely to continue to be in darkness. And hence we have this prophetic way, which in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reflected in the one who has sent rahmatil lil alameen, mercy to the worlds, we have the details of the sunnah of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We mentioned earlier that religion does not present itself in terms of abstractions that only philosophers or intellectuals might understand. Religion is practicalities. Anybody, smart or not so smart, can understand it. Every Muslim knows what he is required to do, what he should be doing. Not everybody does those things, but at least what he ought to be doing is, in the great majority of cases, something that is known. You don't have to be an intellectual to be one of Allah's awliya. And so we have in every single circumstance of our life this choice. Not just a theoretical demand to be good and to transcend the lower self, but a practical example of how that is to be achieved. So that the books of fiqh are nothing other than the manuals of our spiritual instruction. And we can simply stick with the outward of those books of fiqh and follow a lot of instructions in the hope and expectation of rewards in the afterlife. We can see that these instructions have a purpose, which is to lift us out of a form of life in which we are just shadows amongst shadows, and into a form of life in which there is within us something of the light that is in its perfect form present in the chosen one, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. This is the option that we have, to stay with the shadows or to move to the light. And the way that we move to the light is to emulate the one who is himself light, the one whose ruh shone brightly, the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this we do through emulating him, through kamal al-mutaba'ati lahu, zahiran wa batinan, in perfect emulation of him outwardly and inwardly. And so we find this way of Islam, this Sharia of Islam, which is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. The word Sharia means a road, a way, and in ancient Arabic it meant a way to a watering hole, where the animals could find water in the desert. It is not an end in itself. We do not stop there, but it is a means to an end. It is the only means to the end that we seek. Comes equipped with prohibitions and with recommendations, with prescriptions of things that are simply lawful, with things that are reprehensible. It tells us that certain things are forbidden. Everything in the life of the believer immediately becomes meaningful, because everything that confronts him falls into one of those 5 categories. And it's the technical skill and the challenge and the vocation of the scholars to determine which human actions fall in each of those categories. But it is the light of the Holy Prophet ﷺ that enables us to discern between actions and to see into which of those categories they fall. And so what we find that the Prophet ﷺ is showing us a way that is a practical way, not a theoretical or an abstract way, but a way that is to do with mu'amala. This is why he says, ad-dinu mu'amala. Religion is about engagement. It is about practicalities. But of course, the outward forms are not themselves sufficient. The form of a prayer could be perfect, but the person could actually not have made the right niyyah. Or the form of the prayer could be perfect, but the person might not be in wudu, and so on. There is an inward reality as well. And the niyyah is essential, and also the attachment of the heart to the Creator, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, is of the essence. That is why the first hadith that we learn, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are but by intentions, which begins, Sahih al-Bukhari, at the beginning of the Kitabat al-Wahi, actions are by intentions. And the intention is not something that anybody can see in you. Nobody knows what your intention is when you do anything. Sometimes through insight and knowing you well, they can intuit what your intention might be in doing a certain thing. But it is essentially to do with your ikhlas, to do with the purity of your relationship to your Lord. And unless that intention is there, that is the key to the lock. The door will not open, however magnificent the door might be. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ is therefore giving us a sunnah that is twofold. Outward forms that enable us to turn away from the ugliness of the forms that our egos would choose and to conform ourselves to the pattern of life which adorned the form of the best of creation, ﷺ, and also inward forms, ahwal qalbiyya, states of the heart, which enable the spirit to shine and the ego, the lower self, to be suppressed and to die away. And this is the way of the true Muslim. True Muslim is the one who inwardly is illuminated by his proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the glowing of the ruh that is from the command of his Lord, and the one who is outwardly a person of light, not just a person who has the light that enables him to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong, rather than bumping into things in the darkness, but also a light that sheds light so that others may be guided. Others look at him, just as he looks at the Holy Prophet ﷺ and is illuminated by his example. Others look at him, the one who is following the Sunnah, and are illuminated and inspired by that example and learn themselves. Whether it be family or friends or colleagues or anybody who meets them, they walk in the light of that person. And to the extent that that person is inwardly as well as outwardly a person of light, they will be inspired, and this is how Islam spreads. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people of light inwardly and outwardly. The beautiful dua that the Shaykh recited, that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wished to be given light above him, beneath him, before him, to his right side, to his left side, within him. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to illuminate our hearts, to chase away the shadows, and to make us people who are inwardly and outwardly luminous, and to make our families and our masajid and our communities and our scholars and our awam, insha'Allah, people of light, so that once again the ummah may be seen to be an ummah of mercy and of light and of right guidance in a time of darkness. Barakallahu feekum wal afu minkum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.